You're listening to Talking to Teens, where we speak with leading experts from a variety of disciplines about the art and science of parenting teenagers. I'm your host, Andy Earle. Hey, we're here today with Tobias Rose-Stockwell talking about social media and specifically how and why it has been designed to produce outrage among users. And when you look at the psychology of the human brain and how it interacts with the features of social media, you start to be able to understand on a much deeper level why these platforms are really problematic for adults and especially for teenagers. When you really do a deep dive into this stuff, you start to develop a much higher level of awareness about what's going on, which can really protect you from a lot of the negative effects of social media. Tobias has been researching this topic for quite a long time now, and he is the author of the new book, Outrage Machine: How Tech Amplifies Discontent, Disrupts Democracy, and What We Can Do About It. Tobias is a writer, designer, and media researcher whose work has been featured in major outlets such as The Atlantic, Wired, NPR, BBC, CNN, and many others. His research has been cited in the adoption of many key interventions to reduce toxicity and polarization within leading tech platforms. He previously led humanitarian projects in Southeast Asia focused on civil war reconstruction efforts, for which he was honored with an award from the 14th Dalai Lama. We're here with Tobias today to look deeper under the hood of social media sites and to really understand on a much more profound level what's going on when we use social media and why using these platforms inevitably leads to feelings of outrage, why it drives a wedge between people, and why it often leads us to develop really, really strong beliefs about things that we don't actually understand. And as we'll see, these results can be really problematic if they're left unchecked. I am so excited to have Tobias on the show today to talk about all that and a whole lot more. Tobias, thank you so much for coming on Talking to Teens.
Thanks so much for having me.
I have just finished reading your book, Outrage Machine. Man, you got a lot of really, really interesting stuff in here. I think it's going to be super relevant.
Awesome. Great. I'm excited to dig in. Thank you for reading.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I couldn't put this down, really. There's so much meat in here. You really got me thinking about a lot of topics. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, well, I was a little bit early in the world of social media, recognizing that it was kind of this weird thing that was very influential and impactful on us. I had this experience of going viral when I was pretty young, in the days before social media had really taken over our lives. I've been traveling through Asia as a backpacker immediately after college. I met a monk, this Cambodian monk, Buddhist monk, who basically invited me out to his village in the middle of nowhere, which was, a really fun, interesting opportunity to kind of connect with a different culture and, have this meaningful travel experience. And, travel is such an important part of a young person's life. It really was for me. Yeah, I got pulled out to this community in the middle of the kind of rice fields in northwestern Cambodia. When I got there, he put me in this pagoda. Well, I expected to just have this community visit. There was actually several hundred farmers there, common council, village elders, and kind of one by one they got up and said, "Thank you for coming. We've been waiting for you. We so agree that we're so grateful that you've agreed to help us rebuild our reservoir." So I was shocked, to say the least. I was confused. I was like, "I'm sorry, what reservoir? Yeah, are you talking to me? Is there someone else here?" So this monk had basically kind of spun up a tall tale to the rest of his community there, that he had met this guy, that this guy was going to help him rebuild this reservoir, which I certainly was not prepared to do. I was, a backpacker with barely any money, no background in hydrology, not a trust fund kid, nothing that would have suggested that I could actually do this. But I listened to their project, and this monk, he ran a local NGO that provided services to about 6,000 different farmers in that area, in that region. They were collectively trying to rebuild this big reservoir. Now, when I say reservoir, it was more like a lake. like a giant a giant lake that provided a second crop of rice through irrigation to this community there, and they were looking for about $15,000 to do that. And I spent a couple days with them and just like hearing their story, and I'm like, wow, you definitely have the wrong person, but I can I'll at least be an advocate on your behalf, and
Yeah, I'll
I'll
talk to some people, no promises. I'll put in a word, see if I can get anybody interested, and I'll be in touch. Yeah.
I wrote an email to friends and family back home, and this is in 2003, 2004, so it was like days before social media. And that email landed, went out to a listserv, a bunch of people, and within this listserv there was one link out to a site that a friend had designed, and this friend would go on to be one of the first engineers at Twitter. And this site was a social media site. It was a pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook social media site, and the email and the text in it went viral from that point. So it was for the friends of friends of friends. All of a sudden, I had this like tremendous outpouring of support. Who people had read this piece, this kind of impassioned piece I had written about the monks, and they're like, "This is amazing. How can I help?" Suddenly, I had interest. There was just, there was people that were interested in donating, people interested in connecting with engineers, and all of a sudden, there's kind of explosion of interest and empathy in this, in this group of villagers in the middle of nowhere. They were looking for $15,000 to do this thing, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I can spend 2 months doing this. And I didn't have a whole lot going on at that point in time. I was, still in those kind of reflective years after college, trying to figure out what I really want to do with my life. So I'm like, I can spend a couple months doing this. So I went back to the United States, started doing a little bit of fundraising for this community. Went back to work, saved up some more money, and then came back to Cambodia a couple months later. And what I thought would be $15,000 and maybe 2 months of my life, I ended up living in Cambodia for almost 7 years, working on this project. And 2 months turned into almost 7 years, and then $15,000 turned into $250,000. It was a huge project, basically through this like ever escalating commitment of of work and interest and kind of fascination. I ended up, basically doing a DIY Peace Corps in Cambodia during my 20s. And that was enabled by social media. So I was really, really fascinated by how powerful this technology was for connecting people to previously unseen causes, for kind of being a positive influence in people's lives, and for making a difference in the world. So that was really kind of the origin story of how I got obsessed with social media, maybe a decade before everyone else did. So that's how I fell into this work.
It's funny how in the early days of social media, it was like so positive. And you even talk about the origin of the like button. And it was like, yeah, we wanted to make it really frictionless and easy for people to like spread positive vibes and say, hey, that's cool. I like that. And it's like so much of these things that I think we genuinely thought was just all good, and we're building utopia where everyone's going to be connected, and we're going to just all be sharing things and liking stuff and supporting each other, and then here we are kind of like with the fallout of that, and looking at kind of places where, well, okay, maybe it's not as quite as utopian as we initially thought.
Right. Yeah. And you remember what it was like. I mean, some of us remember what it was like back in those early days of social media, circa 2010, 2011. There was this real kind of euphoria around what social media could be to the world. It really felt like, there was the Arab Spring. There was all these dictators being toppled in the Middle East using Twitter and Facebook. There was this kind of outpouring of sudden new awareness of a lot of the kind of problems, harms, and causes that were previously kind of hidden from view and away from mainstream media interest. Yeah, there was this real kind of moment of excitement and optimism about what social media could do and what it could create in the world. But it turns out that, a lot of those same dynamics, right, the things that allow for you to raise awareness for an emotional cause, a hidden emotional cause in the middle of nowhere, can also really rally people around any hidden emotional cause, right? And can give the ability to raise huge awareness and interest and activations and mobilizations for just about any fringe cause. For better or worse, we ended up with this kind of new crisis of like all of the ways these tools made it so good also have made it really dangerous for society overall, right? They've really kind of caused us to be more anxious, more emotionally concerned about things that otherwise we maybe wouldn't be, and also have really like flooded us with a sense of urgency of the problems of the world in a way that hasn't been the case in the past. And the result of that is like, I think, a sense of unfortunately kind of learned helplessness in which we feel totally overwhelmed by the problems of the world. We've reached well beyond the kind of saturation point where we can parse the amount of difficulties that we're facing as a species. We feel overwhelmed, we feel depressed, we feel anxious. And I think kids are absolutely feeling that in some ways more than adults because they don't have any models for what it was like before. So they're just kind of growing into this world of social media and metrics and evaluation and viral content that is really negative for kids' mental health.
Well, you have some really interesting research all throughout the book, and really you kind of break down sort of the mechanics of how these like different platforms work, and then mix that with psychology of how the human brain works to sort of really unpack why things have sort of gone in the direction that they have, why a lot of this is sort of has become problematic over the years, and a lot. I mean, there's so much we could talk about in here. There's a lot of stuff that stands out to me. One thing really is talking about emotions or emotional content. I thought this was fascinating. You have some research in here from Upworthy with kind of these quadrants of different emotions: anger, happiness, sadness, relaxation, and it's sort of, I guess, looking at after a bunch of different tests that they ran, like which quadrants are the most likely to cause people to share something.
There's really interesting research on this, which is, we kind of assume that, oh, well, if you put good stuff online and if you give people a choice into what they are clicking on, what they're looking at, then you're going to get the best stuff that people will look at. People want to feel good, so they're going to look at the good stuff. People want to feel, optimistic and happy, so they're going to kind of read those good stories and they're going to click on those things. But it actually turns out that we have real negativity bias in the way we consume content online, and that kind of happy, hunky-dory stories that might fill us with good vibes are not actually what we really click on. We actually tend to click on stuff that is negatively valenced, so stuff that has difficult emotions, right? Stuff like stuff that is scary, stuff that is angering, stuff that is outrageous, stuff that is kind of sad. We will doom scrolling is a thing for a reason. It's like we really do respond to the horrors of the world in a meaningful way, and we respond to that significantly, right? And that's part of our wiring in a way, I think, right? We are, our ancestors, it was more helpful for them to be attuned to the potential dangers and harms in your community and in your world.
Everything's fine. People are great. People feel good. Okay, no big deal. Oh, something scary? Right. Someone's mad. Yeah. Okay. Right. Pay attention to that.
That's right. And there's a couple different ways in which that works, right? So we're highly attuned to status in our communities, and this is a way it really affects kids in a big way, right? So we within our communities, we really want to know who is in charge, who is on top, who is down. And that's the way our brains are kind of naturally wired. It's like we want to maintain good status in our communities and our tribes. So we focus on those signals and cues around that pretty regularly, which makes a lot of sense, right? You want, like, for our ancestors, that was a really helpful thing. But in modern times, we've basically built a system, social media has overlaid on our lives, our interpersonal lives, our public lives, our private lives, in this very intrusive way. And the result of that is that we're kind of constantly flooded with these social metrics of acclaim, of disapproval, of judgment, of gossip, of hearsay. It really is kind of a perfect storm of triggering some of our innate instincts to find, to figure out what's wrong, who's doing the bad thing, how can we shame the person that's doing the bad thing, how can we put people in these hierarchies where we're really conscious of who's up and who's down. And that's what social media has done very well. It's just built itself on top of some of these very basic human desires, all in the name of engagement. And engagement, as we know, engagement equals ad revenue on these platforms, and that's a pretty basic metric, which is if you're using advertising to run your business, then you want to keep people on there as long as possible. And that's unfortunately part of the way these tools are designed these days.
Yeah, I loved some of these really interesting stuff you look at in here, like a study of 100 million different headlines showing the top performing ones, or some of these I loved: tears of joy, make you cry, shocked to see, give you goosebumps. It's just data driven, really testing and seeing what works, and not really malicious, but just, oh, hey, this is working. This, people are clicking more on this, and it's kind of the natural reaction that happens. And something that really fascinated me is actually something that is from Mark Zuckerberg, actually, is sort of this. He was really looking at kind of the moderation that they're doing on Facebook, and what content is banned versus what content is acceptable. And it forms this really interesting pattern when you look at kind of the engagement.
This was a pattern on Facebook that they found, an unexpected pattern that they found back. They publicly talked about it in 2018. They had been researching it before that, which is this very strange phenomenon. It's called the borderline engagement phenomenon, which is that if you draw a line around your content, and there's certain things that are constantly being they're always banned on the platform, right? So there's hate speech and violence, pornography, and that kind of thing are always banned on these platforms, right? There's always a kind of a content moderation line when it comes to these very problematic pieces of content. But so, and if you put this on a graph of the level of engagement that a piece of content will get, average content, kind of your average social media normal feed stuff, right? The baby pictures from your friends, the food, the food shot on your Instagram, the job update, whatever, that'll get kind of average engagement. And of course, if you put something that is beyond the line of content moderation, that'll get zero engagement, right? So that'll drop it to zero. But as you approach the line of content moderation. So as you approach the stuff that is, it's not hate speech, but it's everything but hate speech. It's not violence. It's kind of everything but violence. It's not the terrible, completely atrocious language. It is like everything but the most. The actually engagement will spike up exponentially as you approach that kind of content line. So your content's banned if you pass the line, but if you walk up to the line, and I speak about this in the book in the context of line steppers, which is people who have figured this out to build audiences, you can actually just, walk straight up to the line and not quite pass over it. And then you'll get a tremendous amount of natural engagement from it. And that happens for a couple of reasons. It happens because we are, like all those things we just said, we are very attuned to kind of the outrages in our communities and the things, the gossip and the kind of juicy and salacious kind of dirty stuff that we're naturally predisposed to look at that stuff. And then and when we see that stuff online, we feel called, like if someone posts something that's like a abhorrent comment, a terrible piece of commentary about a group of people that you respect or that you care about, we feel called to respond to that, right? So we feel called to actually comment on that and like fight them in that space. We're like, no, you are actually wrong here. You are mistaken. These are the reasons why you are wrong. Now, engagement algorithms, they actually look for what is called MSI, which stands for meaningful social interactions, right? So that was the original engagement algorithm that Facebook deployed. And MSI is a very powerful way of rank ordering content. And like, there's a reason why we have engagement algorithms. We have them because we have too much information. We just produce far too much It's impossible to look everything exactly, and you don't want to lose the important post, underneath the 50 food shots of your, that your friends made, right? You want to see the stuff that's most interesting to you. So there's a real useful element to why we have these engagement algorithms. But when you're looking for meaningful social interactions, there's the things that the algorithm thinks that you are going to respond to. Some of your friends getting to a heated argument that actually would potentially get more engagement. That will get more engagement from you. So that is likely to be served to you above other content. So that kind of sticks to the top of our feeds when we open our apps, right? It's the kind of disgusting, angry conversation, is the fight about the news item. It's the moral condemnation of someone for doing something they think was wrong. And these moments of kind of moral disgust, they explode in our social networks, and it's impossible to avoid them, right? Because even if you're not interested in the topic, if enough of your friends are talking about it, you need to be educated on it. You need to actually have an opinion on it. You need to pick a side of these moral disagreements, right? So that's the kind of the core of the issue. And then there's this other piece that happens on top of that, which is once kind of old guard or traditional journalism gets involved, or web journalism gets involved, when they see a certain number of people that are angry about something, right? They see a really heated discussion on Twitter between, say, like 5 individuals, and they're going back and forth, and they're angry about something. A savvy web journalist can look at that item and they say, oh, well, look, people are angry about this thing. I bet more people would be angry about it if I wrote a story about it. And they'll take that small altercation between, say like 5 to 10 people online, and they can write a whole story about it saying people are angry about X, right? So people on Twitter are angry about X, and they then post that online, and then that story gets, that blows it far out of the range of these 5 to 10 people that were angry about something. Instead, now it's exposed to thousands of people who are now like, wait, why are people angry about this ridiculous thing? It only takes one person to be angry about something, something ridiculous, for everyone to take note, and then everyone's kind of paid along the way in this process. So the people that are engaging in the arguments, they might be getting likes and shares for their posts. The social media company is getting the ad revenue for keeping us on the site longer, and then the journalist is getting paid for pushing people to their web and getting to their website and getting traffic from that. It's basically built this perfect machine for taking obscure outrages that normally would just be silly altercations in the corner of the web, and we've served them up for everyone to pick a side on that particular issue. That has really elevated a sense of, I think, of anxiety and frustration and anger and in some ways despair when we look at the state of discourse online, because it's actually infected big way, right? You'll see a lot of stories in major news outlets that are just people are angry about stories, right? People are angry about X stories. And yeah, that's not good. And especially, again, to bring it back to teens here, it's really, I think, hard for kids to parse what is like worth fighting about, like what is actually why is everyone so angry all the time? And that can be really hard on teens.
We're here today with Tobias Rose-Stockwell talking about how social media sites have been engineered to produce feelings of outrage, to divide people against each other, and to lead us to form really, really strong opinions about things that we don't actually understand. And we're not done yet. Here's a look at what's coming up in the second half of the show.
I am obsessed with social media, just like everyone else. In some ways more so because I've been writing a book about it for such a long time. I had a couple of experiences that made it into the book that I think were really indicative of this strange, messy way that social media forces us to pick sides on issues. I didn't have an opinion about pit bulls. I really like it. I've heard that they're dangerous breeds before, but I personally have known a couple of pit bulls that were just like really sweet dogs. I was scrolling one day. There was a video. It was like a front yard ring cam footage of a cat sitting on a porch. This woman is walking her 2 pit bulls down the street, and you can see the woman approaching from a distance. The cat isn't really looking. And the pit bulls like instantly pull the woman to the ground, chasing after this cat. They reach the cat and they start mauling the cat. And this is a kind of an instant viral sensation on Facebook. In this moment, I'm just like flooded with emotions. I'm like, this is terrible. Like, this is wrong. And I had this instant judgment. So I quickly jumped to the conclusion, as I think most people do when they see that video, that all pit bulls are dangerous, right? And it was only after a really long and kind of painful process that I reevaluated that initial impulse that I had about it. If you and I are having a conversation privately, there's a circle of trust that is present in our conversation, and that I'm more likely to listen to the core of what you're saying, the kind of central point of your argument. If we're disagreeing in this moment, I can look at you, I can see you're a real human, can have a real-time conversation. I can hear the inflections in your voice. Even though I disagree with you strongly, I'm not going to shout at you. The way we actually find the truth is because other people check our biases. We have this superpower, which is that we can see the flaws in other people's arguments better than we can see the flaws in our own. So if we take this one-to-one conversation, this basic one-to-one conversation that we're having, and then we erect grandstands around it. We put people in bleachers on either side of us. We suddenly know now that there's hundreds or thousands of people watching us have this conversation. It's going to change our posturing in the conversation. It's going to change how we perform in that conversation. And if we can, even more so, if we can get points, right, from players in the audience when we perform especially well in a way that actually appeals to their biases, then that is a recipe for moral grandstanding and for public performance, and not for trying to find the truth, not for active listening, not for good debate, not for good sense making. The value of living in a democracy comes from the ability to share ideas freely. The current battleground around this is social media presently. It's like, what can we say online? Who's censoring who? Who's being shadow banned? Who's being deplatformed? And that is the current flashpoint around the entirety of the discourse on social media right now. Is like, who is in control of your speech, essentially, right? And really what it comes down to is this kind of philosophical framework, which I think is really important for recognizing that, first of all, most of us are actually wrong much of the time. It's really important to have other people who can have opposing ideas and can call you out when you're wrong. What social media has done, unfortunately, is made many of these kind of mediated, more approachable pieces of our discourse toxic. And it's made it very, very, very hard for us to find any common ground on things. Social media is so important for understanding for parents and for teens what these dynamics look like, because we're not getting an accurate view of the world through social media. It is going through these very specific set of steps. The information that the world is producing is going through these very specific set of steps that is designed to keep us attentive and keep us scrolling above all else.
Want to hear the full episode? Head over to talkingtoteens.com/register for a free trial of our premium podcast. You get exclusive access to loads of great content with no obligation. And your membership supports the work we do here at Talking to Teens. Get started today with a free trial over at talkingtoteens.com/register. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.